Hello again. One of the parts of the hobby I enjoy most is modifying and improving old locos. However, my work desk is upstairs in our house and my layout is in a detached garage. To check on progress of any modifications and to ensure they work, therefore entails constant trips back and forth between the house and the garage. This, to be honest, is becoming a bit of a faff. So I thought a simple loco testing facility would be the answer, and I therefore purchased a floating shelf for the princely sum of £5. It measures 60 by 23 centimetres, is strong, lightweight, portable, and can be stored anywhere. I found some old cork tiles in the garage, left over from a previous layout build, and these were glued to the shelf. They would give a decent base for the track and for anything else I wanted to fix to the shelf. Various pieces of old Pico Code 100 track left over from previous layouts were pinned and then glued to the cork. Some of the pieces were well used, but at least they worked, or so I thought. Some of the ties that held the rails to the sleepers were so worn that the rails just slid out, but I thought that would be okay as the fish plates would hold everything together. Then I made my second and slightly bigger mistake. I'm not sure what brand the fish plates are, but they're certainly not Pico. They are larger, unsightly, and as I discovered too late once the track was glued down, an extremely sloppy fit. So sloppy, in fact, that in some cases current would not pass from one rail to the next. This has subsequently been rectified by soldering wires to the rails at the suspect places. In addition to the loco testing roll, the shelf was originally going to be a small fiddle yard attached to a small micro layout. This is probably no longer going to happen, but it does explain why there are two sidings and a set of points on the board. I wanted to try a PWM controller for this layout as I'd heard good things about them. PWM stands for Pulse Width Modulation, but don't ask me what that means as I haven't a clue. I purchased a controller online, noting that it needs an input of 12 volts DC, so an appropriate mains adapter was purchased at the same time. The cost for both of these items was about £14, and once received they were laid out on the board and temporarily wired to the track. This closer view shows the electrical gubbins in more detail and also shows that there is a switch for on-off and reversing functions. Not all PWM controllers have this, so be careful if you decide to buy one. I bought a small junction box from Screwfix and fitted the controller and switch to it and fixed the whole lot to the board. The box is quite large for such a small layout as this, but it's quite neat, and as the board is only going to be a test facility, it doesn't really matter. If this board was to be a fully scenic layout, it might be a different matter, but I guess it could easily be disguised by hiding it in a small building such as a signal cabin, which could then appropriately perhaps be called junction box. Sorry. The box was fixed near the rear of the board, which was probably mistake number 3, as it means reaching over the track to operate it. This is not a problem with a test track, but not ideal for a scenic layout. Having sorted out the controller situation, it was then time to proceed with the other new part of the project, the rolling road. The DCC Concepts rolling road comes already set up for OOHO gauge, but spare spacers are included for 12mm, 10.5mm or 9mm gauges. Changing them is easy and quick. I purchased a 4-axle pack, but packs are also available for 8 or 12 axles. The 4-axle pack should be sufficient for my needs, but it's nice to know they also supply spares of 2 axles, should my loco suddenly grow extra wheels. The rollers are simply placed on the track and you are ready to go. And I was itching to see how well the rolling road performed with a variety of locos. For the first part of the test, I chose some old Hornby locos, starting with this Class 06 shunter. As you can see, it worked well at varying speeds. Next, an old Hornby Smoky Joe, which also ran well. The final steam loco in this part of the test was this old Hornby J83 tank, which surprised me by running the best of the lot. Somewhat longer than the previous locos was this Lima Class 47 with 6 axles. This shows that the 4-axle set I purchased from DCC Concepts is more than adequate for all my loco fleet. What is not so obvious is whether this loco is actually working, but the light at the front and the gentle side-to-side rocking motion confirms that this is indeed the case. The rolling road performed excellently, so it was now time for the second part of the test. This was to look more closely at how the PWM controller performed using the locos seen previously at various speed settings on the layout. I should say at this point that very slow running is important to me, and I wanted to find out if the controller would be good enough for shunting operations. My Class 06 shunter has a small can-type motor which, like all my locos, works well using my normal Gauge-Master controller. However, with this PWM controller it starts off too quickly. It can be slowed to a reasonable crawl, but it's also rather jerky. Smoky Joe has the same type of cheap motor, but it seems to be a little smoother and more responsive to the controller. It too sometimes starts off too quickly. The J83 has a more open type motor, which was much more controllable, with good slow starting and slow running, both forwards and in reverse. The Lima diesel did not perform well on the layout and shot off at much too high a speed for my liking. As a bonus, I will end with an extra loco, a favourite model of mine, the Austerity Tank by Hornby. This apparently has a Type 7 motor which, together with some sensible gearing, and much to my delight, performed the best of all. In conclusion, this was just a brief test and covered mainly locos with old and/or cheap motors. The controller and the adapter were also cheap at £14. I think it shows that a PWM controller is perfectly adequate for testing purposes on my rolling road. It may well work better with more expensive mechanisms, but as you can probably guess, I don't have any of them. However, it does not give such fine control as I would like for shunting purposes, so for those I will continue using Gauge-Master controllers, which I know from years of experience are excellent. So that's all for now. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.